Night wrapped the alien colony like a heavy blanket, and the wind moved cold dust across empty streets. Inside the command hall, pale lights shook and flickered, and the floor trembled with each distant blast. The colony was small, only a few domes on a harsh world, and every person in it felt the same fear. Their shields were weak, their weapons were few, and the enemy was already on the horizon. Raiders had come from the black, hungry and cruel. They cut the relay towers first, then the power lines. They knew how to break hope before they broke walls. The colony's leader, a calm woman with gray skin and steady eyes, stood at the central console and spoke in a firm voice. She said they would send the call for help. She said they would live if someone heard them. Her hands shook only after she finished speaking. And she made sure no one saw it. In a narrow room below the hall, the communications engineer worked with fast, careful fingers. He was young, but he knew the old code and the new code. He knew the emergency bands that most empires still watched. The beacon core hummed under his touch, and lines of data rolled up the screen like rain. Outside, another blast rolled over the dome. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the engineer wiped it off his face and kept typing. He built the message in simple phrases. He named the colony. He marked the grid and the sky path. He listed the wounded and the missing. He included the time and the threat. He wrote that the raiders would break through in hours, not days. He added one last line that was not in the manual. He wrote "please" because he was tired of pride. Then he looked at the leader through the glass and nodded once. She nodded back, a small sign that meant send it now. The beacon rose on its thin tower and pointed its bright mouth at the night. The first pulse went out like a heartbeat, fast and strong, then another, then a steady rhythm. The signal crossed clouds of dust and old satellites. It leaped into the void where ships and stations listened, or pretended not to. The message was short and clear. It did not beg. It did not lie. It said, "We are under attack. We need help. Our people are in danger. Come if you can." The engineer watched the outflow meter and felt the room grow a little warmer. It was not hope yet, only motion. Only the sign that they had done the one thing they could do. Above him, the leader stood with her officers and mapped the enemy paths. Red dots crawled across the western ridge. A larger shape circled behind them. Perhaps a carrier, perhaps a trick. The leader did not guess. She saved her fear for later. She ordered families into the deep shelters and sent medics to the lower bay. She told the guards to save power and never fire unless they had a clear line. They needed every charge to count. The colony itself seemed to hold its breath. Market stalls stood empty, lights dimmed to a night mode that used less energy. In the school dome, a teacher counted the children again and again. She told them soft stories of home worlds they had never seen. She did not say the word raider. She used the word storm, a kinder word. The children held hands, small, warm, and quiet. In the farming dome, water mist drifted across tall green stacks. A farmer checked the valves and listened to the distant thunder. He thought of his partner in the repair crew and wondered if they would meet again by morning. In the med bay, a doctor cleaned a child's forehead. The cut was small, but the child was shaking. The doctor spoke slowly. He said the shaking was not weakness. It was the body getting ready to run or to fight. He said that was what bodies did when they had to live. The child nodded and looked very brave for a moment, then cried. The doctor held the child and stared at the wall clock that had lost 3 minutes since the last hit. As the beacon sang to the night, replies should have come. This was the way of the Starlings, a signal out, a signal back. Yet the first hour passed without even an echo. The second hour brought only noise. The engineer checked filters and antennas. He rotated the tower. He tried old bands that no one used anymore. He even tried a pirate relay that a friend once warned him never to touch. Nothing clear returned. The leader kept the officers busy with drills and maps. But she watched the comms display with a quiet anger in her eyes. Other empires were out there, rich, strong, proud, and they had patrols near this sector. They had ships that could cross this distance in hours, not days. Still, the board stayed. Dark, and only the beacon pulsed on, a steady heart beating alone in the cold. By the third hour, the raiders probed the outer shield with thin, bright strikes, like knives tapping glass. The shield flared, then held. The leader ordered the decoys. Launched. Small drones that made fake heat and fake movement. The raiders bit at them, then pulled back, testing, learning. A thin thread of smoke drifted inside the command hall. Someone found the short and cut it. The room smelled like metal in panic. The engineer pinched the bridge of his nose and blinked. Lines of numbers swam and settled. He set a rotating key on the beacon. A pattern that would break through some kinds of jamming. He whispered to the machine as if it could hear. It was not prayer, but it was close. The leader heard him and did not smile. She understood. Words to machines were still words to the self, a way to keep the mind steady when the world shook. In the shelters below, old songs started as whispers and grew into a low, steady sound. People sang to keep time, to keep fear from growing larger than their bodies. An elder told a story about first settlers on this planet, how they landed with nothing but a broken ice drill and a will to dig. He said those settlers built the first dome out of scrap and snow and hope. He said they did it because they had each other, not because anyone came to help. In another corner, a child drew a picture on a thin slate. The picture showed a big ship with many lights, coming down like a bright moon. The child did not know the flag of any empire, so the ship wore no mark. It was just help, wide and simple. The child showed the picture to the teacher. The teacher said it was beautiful, and added a small ladder to the ship, because help needs a way to reach the ground. Back in the comms room, a crackle appeared on the screen, small, almost nothing. The engineer froze. He adjusted the gain. He leaned in. The noise steadied into a narrow line, not a message yet, not even a word, but not random. His heart ran faster. He called up to the leader, and she came down the steps 2 at a time. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the hum of the machines and watched the line. The engineer tuned the filters. He shaped the noise. A faint pattern emerged. Slow, heavy, like a drum beat far away. The leader put a hand on the edge of the console. The metal was warm from the heat of the core. The pattern grew stronger, then fell, then rose again. The engineer swallowed and spoke in a low voice. He said, "Someone is out there. Someone is listening." He sent the SOS again with a tighter beam, focused on the path of the pattern. He sent it 3 times. The old number for luck and for physics. Both. The raiders struck again, a stronger hit. The western shield sagged but did not break. Alarms rang, and the med bay took 2 more wounded. The leader gave short orders and kept her eyes on the display. Nothing mattered more now than the thin line of maybe. In the farming dome, the water pumps slowed to save power. Plants folded their leaves as if in sleep. The elder in the shelter paused his story so everyone could listen, their breath held as one body. Awful and beautiful, like the pause before. A storm finally opens. The pattern on the screen wavered, then a shape formed inside it. The engineer read the header and felt his mouth go dry. He did not say the name out loud yet, not until he was sure. He ran the check twice, then a 3rd time. He turned to the leader, eyes wide, and whispered the truth. The SOS had reached someone. It had pierced the long dark and found an ear that would answer. It had reached humanity, the Deathworlders, the ones from the harsh blue planet who had turned their home into a forge and their people into iron. Legends said they were wild and brave and dangerous. Legends said they did not come with blankets and soup. They came with steel and fire. The leader looked at the engineer. The engineer looked back. Around them the colony shook with the next strike. Above them the beacon pulsed. Below them the people sang. The leader straightened her back and spoke in a calm voice once more. She told the officers to prepare for contact. She told the medics to clear a bay. She told the guards to hold fire unless fired upon. She said help might be coming, or something. Like help, they would meet it with open eyes, not open hands. and they would live long enough to see what stepped out of that dark ship when it arrived. The second hour felt longer than a season. The colony moved in slow rhythm, under fear, and every small sound became a sign. A pipe hiss turned into a threat. A door creak sounded like a footstep from an enemy. The leader walked the upper ring and looked through the clear panels at the empty sky. She told herself the sky was not empty. It held paths, it held stations, it held ships with brave crews. Yet no light crossed the black, no friend spoke back. The engineer kept the beacon, singing and added clean repeats on the oldest bands he knew. He tried a call in trade tongue. He tried a call in a formal Empire dialect. He even tried a rough pirate slang he learned from old logs. His voice stayed steady. His hands did not. In the shelter, the elder's voice grew hoarse, but he refused to stop. He told a story about a time when the first farmers learned to pull water from the salty ground. And he said the trick was patience and a strong hand on the wheel. The med bay took in a guard with a burned arm where a panel blew. The doctor sprayed a cold gel and told him to breathe slow, to breathe like a tide in the school dome. The teacher gave each child a smooth stone to hold. She said the stones were brave stones. They did not run. They did not shake. And the children smiled a little and pretended to be stones too. Above all this, the monitors watched the ridges, and the radar scout dots slid like beetles along the horizon. They tested the shield again, tapping bright points that flashed and died. The leader ordered the power to cycle in a pattern that would look weak. A fake limp, a lure, and the raiders nibbled, curious and greedy. But they did not yet bite. Time stretched, hunger rose, battery lines warmed, and anger grew like a slow fire under the quiet faces. The leader sent a short message to her officers that said simply hold. The engineer sent a narrow beam toward a distant repeater that belonged to a vain little empire known for parades and news banners. He used their polite honor words and their stiff titles. He offered future trade. He begged in a soft way that was not truly begging. But the repeater stayed dumb, and the emptiness answered with the soft hiss of dust. In a corner of the comms room sat a small silver icon, a charm from the engineer's mother. It was shaped like a bird with open wings, and he pressed his thumb to it once. He did not believe in luck, but he believed in habit. He spoke to the leader and told her the beacon was clean. The power was stable. The message was clear. If no one answered, it was not because of their machine. It was because of their hearts. The leader nodded and said she knew. Then she told him to rest, and he said later, and they both smiled in a tired way. A courier drone tried to launch and skittered on a crosswind. Its small frame rattled against a handrail. A young tech caught it and tied it down, and the tech whispered sorry to the drone as if to a child. The elder in the shelter sensed the change in the air, the way old miners feel a roof shift. He stopped his story and listened, and in that shared silence, the colony finally understood the truth that was always close. The great powers were not deaf. They were not blind. They were careful. They were selfish. They measured risk like merchants count coin. To answer this call would cost them. It would stain their ships. It would bring them enemies. The elder felt the ache of that thought and pushed it away. The people needed a softer thought. He told them the first settlers were alone once too. He said help sometimes arrives late, and sometimes it wears a face we do not expect. In the command hall, the leader reviewed a last line of defense that would cut the Western Dome free if the shield failed. A hard choice, a cruel choice, a choice that might save half and doom half. She hated it, but she kept it on the board. The engineer ran one more sweep, and in a thin fold of static he saw a pattern that did not match noise. He leaned close, he tuned. He tasted hope and pushed it down so it would not shake his hands. And he said into the mic, "This is Colony ARAM 9. We are still under attack. Our beacons are live. Our people are alive. Our request stands. Please reply if you hear." The words were simple. The words were steady. The words went out again like a small boat on a black sea. Far away, someone might have heard. But the second hour closed like a cold door, and the third hour put a heavy bar across it, leaving them with the pulse of the beacon and the slow beat of their own hearts. The reply came not like a friendly knock, but like a weight dropped from a great height. It was a hard tone that cut through static and through doubt. It carried no music and no sweet phrase. The comms board printed 2 words first: signal received. The engineer stared at the letters and felt the floor tilt. It was so little and yet it was everything. He called the leader, and she came down fast. Her officers just 1 pace behind. They all looked at the same stark text, and they knew legends. By the way their bodies reacted, a chill across the skin, a dry mouth, a tight stomach. The Deathworlders had a way of saying much with little. The engineer sent back a clean packet with the SOS and the latest shield data. He added a small line, requesting aid. Please advise, a beat passed. The raiders tested the rear arc, the shield. Coughed. Medics braced a brace of wounded on an auto gurney. The shelter songs fell quiet, as if someone had turned a dial. The children clutched their stones. The elder closed his eyes. The reply arrived in a block that felt like iron in the hand. Path plotted, arrival pending, hold position, do not negotiate. A new line followed with a code that did not belong to any polite empire. A sharp human tactical tag with nested keys and warning glyphs. The leader read it and tasted old stories. She asked the engineer to confirm the header 3 times. He did. And each time the signature resolved to the same strange, harsh beauty, a human fleet mark, old and proud and true. The command hall seemed taller for a moment, like the air itself had been stretched thin. Then the hall felt smaller, because the meaning was bigger. They had been heard by the ones who were said to walk into storms not with umbrellas, but with hammers. The leader opened a channel and spoke in a clear voice that she aimed like a beam. She said, "This is Aram 9, we acknowledge. Our civilians are in shelters. Our shield is failing. Our attackers are unknown raider class. Numbers variable. We will hold position. Please advise on rules of contact." The answer was a single line that felt more like a hand on the shoulder than a letter on a screen. Rules of contact. We will define on arrival. Hold. Scanners began to show shifts in the far dark. Not lights yet. Not shapes. But gravity whispers. The kind of deep tug that large mass makes as it falls across the black. The engineer set long-range eyes toward that tug and watched the faint line curve. He whispered to his bird charm and did not care who saw. The leader moved through the domes like a current through wire. She told the guards to keep their fingers off the triggers unless fired upon. She told the med team to clear the upper bay for unknown cargo. She told the teacher to keep the children busy with a game of counting breaths. She told the elder to keep talking because silence was the worst enemy after fear. And she told herself to be steel but not stone, because stone breaks and steel bends and then stands again. The raiders sensed change. Predators always do. Their taps turned to blows. A test became a push. The western arc flared white and dimmed to a wounded yellow. The leader felt the math in her bones. Minutes left, not hours. The engineer sent a tight beam again. He said, "Shield is at 40% and falling. Civilians secured. Enemy pressure increasing. Arrival time request." The human reply did not give a time. It gave an instruction. Mark enemy lines with decoys. Mask vital heat. Keep shield noise high. Then another line that made the officers trade glances. "Stay calm. We are close." The last 3 words felt like a promise and a threat both. Close could mean help. Close could also mean a storm approaching. The elder told the children a new story. He told them about a big animal that lived in the ice and did not fear the wind. When storms came, the animal turned its face into the wind and walked forward. It did not ask the storm to be kind. It did not ask the sky to open. It simply moved, slow and sure, and the storm became a memory. Above them, in the far lanes, the tug in the dark grew heavier. Instruments clicked as if their metal teeth were chattering. The engineer watched a line of numbers change in a way that meant burn and vector and mass. He did not say ship yet. He did not say fleet yet. He only said to the leader that something big was committing. And the leader nodded and pressed her hand flat to the nearest bulkhead, as if to feel the heart of the colony answer the beat of the thing coming through the dark. The raiders threw a spear of light that made the shield scream. The teacher made the children breathe in and out in a slow count. The doctor tightened the strap on a gurney and looked at the ceiling like it was a sky he could talk to. And in the comms room, the engineer read one more human line as it printed in cool. Steady strokes, Aram 9, maintain position, predators. Identified, do not parley, we are inbound. And somewhere beyond sight, a human drive lit like a new small sun and bent the night around it, bringing with it the rumor of steel and the promise of change. The message that said we are inbound did not calm the colony. It changed the shape of their fear and turned it into a hard focus. The leader moved from station to station with a firm voice and a steady step. She told the guards to strip every weapon for parts and check every power cell twice. She told the medics to line the bays with glow tape and clear all carts from the main corridor so stretchers could move fast. She told the engineer to keep the beacon singing, but to shift the key every 10 minutes so the raiders could not lock. A jam. She asked the teacher to start a breathing game so the children would move their air in slow waves and not in sharp gasps. She asked the elder to keep telling stories, because stories hold the mind like hands can hold a frightened face. The engineer studied the human packets that kept arriving in short, strong bursts. There was no fluff, no warm words, only useful lines like hooks to hold on to. Vector confirms. Enemy mass 20+ small hulls and 1 carrier hull, non-state. Actors, probable slavers, rules of contact hostile, do not bargain. Then another line with a strange human trick. They sent a tiny training block with it. A map that showed how to make heat look like rocks and how to make rocks look like heat. The engineer laughed once in surprise and then did as told. He bent the colony's heat like a smith bends metal and spread it across empty fields, so hungry. I would have too much to chew. The leader watched the western arc boil under thin, bright strikes. The shield was a tired animal now. It would hold a little longer if they did not anger it with waste. She told her officers to cut power to the park lights and the spare fans and the nice warm floor coils in the halls. She told them comfort could return later, if later still existed. Out on the horizon, the raider dots began to drift and split. They felt the change the way sharks feel blood. They were greedy and they were patient, 2 bad things to find in one. Body, they pressed harder on the south line and then pulled back. They hit the west and then the north. They kept searching for a soft place to bite. The colony turned its face into the wind and did not move. In the shelter, a child asked if the Deathworlders would hurt them. The elder said the Deathworlders were like a storm that chose where to fall. And right now the storm had chosen the raiders. The child held a brave stone and nodded and closed her eyes and imagined a ship with a ladder reaching to the ground. Not for rescue, but for hunters. To climb down. A guard with a burned arm came back to his post with a strap and a smile that was not real. He said he could shoot with the other hand. The doctor said he was a fool, and then said he was brave, and then sent him with a fresh gel pack and a soft curse that sounded like love. The engineer set a new array of decoys. He gave them slow breaths and quick bursts so the raiders' teeth would click on air. He kept the human channel on one speaker at a whisper. He heard only silence between the short lines. A silence that felt like someone walking without making noise. The leader stood at the clear panel again and looked out into the black. It was still empty to the eye, but her bones told her mass was coming. She felt the way the numbers on the long-range set changed. A soft slide in the decimals that meant a heavy thing was moving fast. She did not ask for a time again because the Deathworlders had already given an answer in the only way they ever did. Not with hours, but with action. Stay calm. We are close. She took those words and set them in the middle of her chest like a hot coal to burn away the cold. The raiders pushed again, harder. A long blade of light tore at the western arc and made it scream like metal. The leader's hand hovered over the ugly command that would cut the Western Dome loose. She hated it like poison. She prayed to nothing, that she would not have to press it. She kept her face still. The engineer sent an update in plain lines. Shield at 33% and falling. Civilian units stable. Decoys active. Enemy pressure rising. The human reply did not say sorry, and it did not say hold on much longer. It said mark us an entry lane, do not stand in it, and give them raiders something to chase. The leader nodded once at the clean cruelty of the plan. She told the engineer to open a thin path in the shield over the northern waste where there was nothing but dust and old stones. She told the guards to fire 3 shots into the dark and then run the heat from the empty ice plant like a glowing thread straight into that path. The raiders saw the bait and moved like dogs after meat. The colony watched them go and kept its voice low and its feet still. And above them in the long cold, a new point began to form where there had been no point at all, not light, not yet. But a bruise in the numbers, a dent in the sums, a promise that gravity itself was being pushed and pulled by something made by hands. The world did not welcome the human ship with music. The world did not even see it at first. It felt it. The way a pond feels a heavy stone before the splash. Instruments clicked and the long-range graphs bent. The engineer whispered a count under his breath and did not know he was doing it. The elder in the shelter paused his story because he felt a pressure in his ears like the day before the first winter storm. The leader gave short orders that sounded like steps in a dance. Dot teams to safe corners, med teams to the upper hall. Guards hold lines and sights down. No one fires without her voice. The teacher made the children count breaths with her, in and out, slow and even, while the smallest ones fell asleep because fear and waiting can make even thunder feel far away. The raiders did not sleep. They snarled around the path the colony had marked and tried to bite through the skin of the shield where the glow was bright. They dragged their teeth across it and spat sparks. They raised more power and prepared to push as one, they believed. They had learned the rhythm of the prey. They believed they would break it with the next strike. Then the human drive light touched the outer dark. It did not bloom like a soft flower. It punched a clean hole in the night and pulled its own light out behind it like a blade pulled from a sheath. The first thing the colony saw was not the hull. It was the shadow the hull made against the stars, a hard wedge that ate starlight and gave back a deep, wrong curve. The next thing they saw was the way the raiders lost their neat lines and broke like birds when a hawk falls. The human channel spoke in the same flat way, and the words were stones in a row. Aram 9. We are here. Hold your fire. Track enemy with pings only. And the leader told her hands to unclench, and told her lungs to breathe, and told her heart to stop trying to fight its way out of her chest. Because the moment had changed. Because for the first time since the first blast hit the outer dome, the colony did not feel like a small boat on a big sea. It felt like a small boat with a great cliff at its back and a storm breaking on that cliff instead of on its deck. The human ship spread its profile like a knife held flat. To show a hungry dog the length of the metal, it did not send greetings. It sent solutions. Drones fell from hidden bays like seeds. They lit lines through the dark that only a trained eye could follow. They made nets of numbers and cages of force. The raiders tried to run. Some tried to charge. The human ship did not chase the ones who ran yet. It killed the ones who charged first, fast and without noise on the open channel. Only a short private line to the leader that said hold the South Arc. Do not open any ports. Keep civilians down. Then a small, almost kind line. We will handle the rest. The leader closed her eyes for one long breath and opened them again and saw her officers looking at her like people look at a door that might yet open. She nodded and gave the orders as if they were hers. Because in a way they were. The human ship did not wear their flag, but it wore their hope, and hope is a kind of flag that you fly inside your ribs. The engineer adjusted the pings and watched the drones draw a picture of the battlefield that was cleaner than any picture he had seen. He watched human code chew through raider noise like a patient blade through old rope. He thought of the bird. charm under his thumb, and of the stories he had heard about the Blue Planet and the Iron People, and how they never bring soup. They bring a storm. He found that the thought did not scare him now. It steadied him. Outside, the human hull rolled just enough to place its belly guns at the right angle. The raider carrier tried to throw a screen and found its screen sliced along lines it could not see. The colony felt the air pressure change, as if a weather front had passed through the halls. The elder put a hand on the shelter wall and told the children to feel the wall breathe with them. He said the wall was a chest and the ship outside was a heart, and for once no one corrected his simple picture because it felt true. The leader stood at the clear panel and watched a shape that had only been a rumor become a fact. She did not smile and she did not cry. She did not thank any god. She did her job. And the job now was to keep her people still and quiet while the dangerous ship did the work it had promised with its bare, simple words. The raiders, who had come with greed and with habits that had worked in a kinder sky, began to learn what it meant when an SOS reached humanity. And the lesson started in silence and in fire, and in the hard, clean grammar of ships that do not bargain, and the colony, which had asked for help and had received something else, stood between fear and awe and waited to see which one would win. When the first wreck finally fell smoking across the dawn side of their sky, the human ship had not come like a savior wrapped in light. It had come like a blade cutting into the black, and now the colony could only watch as that blade turned on the raiders. The first strike was so clean that some thought they had imagined it. One raider hull, bright with stolen colors and cruel marks, broke apart without sound. It folded like paper under an invisible hammer and spilled its fire into the void. The raiders did not scream on open bands. They cut their channels and tried to scatter, but scattering against hunters like this only made them easier prey. The human drones were not like the small buzzing scouts the colony knew. They moved in perfect swarms, sharp as needles and fast as sparks. They did not waste shots. Every beam went where it must go, cutting engines, tearing weapons, snapping armor like dry wood. The leader stood at the clear panel and kept her face still. Her people behind her whispered or held their breath, but she did not. She watched and measured and understood. This was not aid. This was punishment. The human ship did not talk. It did not comfort. It did not explain. It acted, and in its action lay the only answer it would ever give. The raider carrier tried to throw out fighters like chaff. Dozens of small hulls scattered in arcs, hoping to confuse the human targeting. But the human ship seemed to see through confusion the way an eagle sees through leaves. Its guns tracked the center of weight, not the edges. They ignored the noise and hit the heart. The carrier shuddered under blows it could not shield. And its fighters, parentless and frantic, fell into the human nets. Some turned to run, engines flaring like terrified animals. But the drones were faster, and their beams were merciless. One by one, the small raider ships died in silence, their fire briefly painting the void before fading into nothing. The engineer watched the human codes on his console and felt his stomach twist. It was too precise, too hard. There was no wasted line, no wasted number. It was not war like he had known it, desperate and messy. It was execution dressed as war. The elder in the shelter told the children to keep their eyes closed and imagine the brave stones in their hands, glowing with strength. He said storms were loud, but storms pass. Yet even he paused when the floor trembled with the shock of a raider hull breaking in orbit above them, and in his pause the children heard the truth. This was not a storm that passed. This was a storm that stayed until nothing dared to move against it. The leader called her officers close and gave soft orders. She said no one would move the shield lines. No one would send messages except through her. No one would approach the humans without command. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. She knew what the colony had become, a witness, not a partner. And witnesses who misstep sometimes meet the same end as the guilty. She prayed in silence that her people would remember discipline now. When one mistake could turn their fragile safety into ash, the engineer whispered that another packet had come. The leader read it with care. It said target neutralization in progress. Colony maintain silence, observe only, then a final colder line. You are not under threat from us unless you alter terms. She let the officers read it too, so none would doubt what kind of ally had answered their call. Not a friend, not a savior, but a power that made its own rules. In the med bay, the doctor washed blood from his hands and told the wounded to rest. His voice shook when the walls shivered with another human strike. He thought of what kind of being wrote words like, unless you alter terms, and wondered what it would take for such a ship to turn its eyes from raiders to them. The raiders began to break, their neat patterns collapsing into a scatter of panic. Some ships turned nose down and burned hard for escape. Others tried one last desperate rush at the colony, claws out and teeth bared, but the human ship saw through both tricks. It let the runners run for 3 breaths, then cut them with a long line of fire that reached across the stars like a whip. It let the chargers come close enough that the colony's shield began to scream. Then it spoke again on a private line. Open your south arc for 1 second, only one. The leader felt her heart stop. To open the shield was madness. Yet she read the pattern of their lines, and she saw what the humans had drawn. She gave the order. The south arc opened for a single breath. A gap like a mouth. The chargers fell into it. And in that breath, the human ship spat fire through the gap and erased the chargers from existence. The arc closed again, the dome held, and the only sign of what had happened was the glow of broken ships drifting like embers. The elder in the shelter told the children they could open their eyes now. The storm was moving away, but when they opened them, some cried. Because the storm had left pieces of light in the sky, beautiful and terrible. Now the colony waited in a silence heavier than before. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of awe. They had seen death come not like claws or teeth, but like a clean machine, and they did not know if they should thank it or hide from it. The leader leaned on the console and told the engineer to keep the channel open. She told her people to stay still. She told herself to breathe. She knew the battle was not done, but something had already changed. The raiders had been broken. The colony had been spared, and humanity, the death worlders of every fearful story, had answered their call, not with aid, not with kindness, but with fire. She thought of the child in the school dome drawing a ship with a ladder to the ground. And she knew the truth. This ship had no ladder, no gentle step down. It had only guns and shadows, yet it had come when no one else had. And that fact alone would carry the colony into a new kind of future, one where their name would be tied forever to the dangerous ship that answered the SOS. And she wondered, with a heart that shook but did not break, whether survival itself was the only kind of mercy the Deathworlders knew how to give. When the last of the raider vessels broke apart under the relentless precision of human fire, the battlefield seemed to fall into a hollow silence. But it was not the quiet of peace. It was the kind of silence that follows a predator's kill, the kind that makes every smaller creature freeze and wonder if they will be the next to be noticed. The colony watched from behind the trembling veil of their shields as the wreckage of their attackers drifted like broken teeth across the stars. They should have cheered. They should have felt safe, yet no one did, because the warship that now owned their sky was still there. Massive, black, and sharp as the edge of a blade. It had not moved on. It had not turned away. It had simply stopped. Killing for now. The leader stood in the command hall. Her officers gathered close, but silent, their eyes fixed on the console where the human channel glowed with its harsh letters. She thought of the words it had sent earlier, cold instructions, sharper than any blade. And she wondered what kind of beings wrote such words without hesitation. She opened the channel with careful hands, her voice steady though her chest felt tight, and she said, "This is Aram 9, our shields are low. Our people are wounded, our attackers are destroyed. We thank you for your aid." There was no answer at once. The seconds stretched heavy and long, until at last the reply came, not warm, not kind, but steady and unyielding. Threat neutralized, survivors identified, do not approach debris, maintain. Position, we will conduct final sweep. Her people looked at her as if waiting for more, for some softer word, but that was all the humans gave. Not comfort, only command. The med bay was full now. The doctor moving from bed to bed with tired eyes and steady hands. He told the wounded that the danger was past, but his own voice betrayed the weight in his heart, because he did not know if danger was truly gone or only changing its face. In the shelter, the elder tried to weave a story around what they had witnessed. He said storms sometimes leave gifts behind, clearer air, stronger ground. But even his old voice shook as the children asked him if the storm outside would leave them alive. He said yes, though he did not know if he was telling truth or only hope. In the school dome, the teacher tried to distract the children by asking them to describe what they would do when the skies cleared. One child said she would plant a tree, another said he would draw another ship, but this time with no ladder at all, because the ship had no kindness in it, only teeth. The engineer sat in the comms room, staring at the codes flowing across his screen. He felt like a man reading the heartbeat of a giant. Each pulse from the human ship carried weight and power. It was not simply communication, it was declaration. Each word carried a warning. Do not cross us, do not doubt us. We came, we saw, and we will not be moved. He traced the tactical instructions the humans had left embedded in their signals, and he marveled at the way they thought. Every calculation precise, every line clean. Nothing wasted, nothing human in the way he understood the word human. Yet he also felt a strange flicker of pride, because they had come when no one else had, and that fact, bare and brutal as it was, burned brighter than silence. Then the warship spoke again, its voice spreading across every receiver in the colony, civilians included, no longer a private whisper, but a command meant to be heard by all. Aram 9, this is Vessel Halcyon. Your call has been answered. Your predators have been destroyed. You will remain silent regarding this event. You will not transmit record beyond your system without our consent. Your survival is your compensation. Do not mistake this for alliance. Do not mistake this for mercy. The words fell like iron rain, and when they ended, the colony was utterly quiet. Men and women looked at each other in disbelief. Children clung to their stones with wide eyes. And the elder bowed his head as if under a heavy weight. The leader stood tall and repeated the words aloud to her officers, so there would be no confusion. Survival is our compensation, she said, and her voice carried both anger and a strange, reluctant respect. Outside, the Halcyon began its sweep of the wreckage. Drones tearing through the broken raider ships with methodical hunger, stripping weapons, erasing data, leaving nothing useful behind. The raiders had come with greed and cruelty, and now even their memory was being consumed. The colony's sky was not free, it was claimed, and they all knew it. They whispered in the shelter that the Deathworlders had not come to save them. They had come to remind the galaxy that nothing moved in the dark without being seen, that no predator hunted without being hunted in turn. The leader, standing at the clear panel, thought of what the children would remember of this day, and she wondered if they would grow up thinking of humanity as saviors, or as another storm that could never be controlled. She did not know. She only knew that their SOS had been answered, and that answer had changed everything for her people, for her colony, and for every empire that would one day hear the story of the night when the Deathworlders came. Not with aid, but with a dangerous ship. Asterisk, the Halcyon did not vanish after victory. It lingered like a shadow across the sky. A reminder that the night was still claimed, not freed. The raiders were broken. Their carrier split open like a rotten fruit, their smaller ships drifting without power or torn apart into glittering fragments. Yet the humans were not finished. They worked with a cold patience that unsettled every eye in the colony. Their drones moved through the wreckage, not to recover, but to erase. They cut data cores into slag. They burned identification plates into ash. They shattered every piece that might carry a story back to anyone else. The Deathworlders were not leaving evidence behind, only a silence deeper than the one that had existed before the raiders came. and the colonists began to understand that this silence was not peace. It was control. Inside the command hall, the leader stood with her hands behind her back, watching the streams of information the engineer pulled from the human packets. Each message was clipped, functional, sharp. One line said salvage denied. One line said no survivors permitted. Another said sweep ongoing, hold position. It was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was a kind of thinking that treated mercy as a risk and risk as an insult. The leader's officers whispered among themselves, some with awe, some with unease, but she silenced them with a glance. She knew what they all must know, that they were alive only because the Halcyon had chosen to focus its wrath on the raiders and not on them. The engineer kept running checks on the beacon, but the humans had jammed the channels now. The colony's voice was cut, sealed, silenced. They were caged under an invisible net. And the realization spread through the population like frost. In the shelters, people huddled close, listening to the faint rumbles that passed through the ground whenever another raider hull was destroyed. The elder tried to steady them with words, but even he struggled to shape the story into something gentle. He told them that predators fight predators, and sometimes prey is spared. But his voice carried a weight that the children heard, even if they did not understand it. The doctor in the med bay cleaned wounds and stitched flesh, but he knew that the most dangerous wound was not on the body. It was in the heart of the people, a fear that no medicine could bind. Some whispered that they had traded one set of monsters for another. Others whispered that perhaps this was the price of survival, that to call to the Deathworlders was to invite judgment, not aid, and that judgment was fire. Then the Halcyon spoke again, its voice carrying across every channel with absolute clarity. Aram 9, your attackers are gone. Your records are restricted. Your survival is conditional. Any attempt to transmit beyond this system will be considered hostile. You will rebuild, you will endure, but you will not speak of us without sanction. Your SOS has been answered, and its memory ends here. The words struck harder than the raider weapons had, because they carried not only command but ownership. They were not allies. They were not even distant protectors. They were jailers ensuring silence. The leader read the message aloud so there would be no mistake, and she felt the weight settle on her people's shoulders. Some cried, some clenched fists, some simply stared into the distance. But all understood, survival had been given, but at a price heavier than coin, heavier even than blood. The human drones returned to the warship, vanishing into its armored belly like sparks swallowed by a forge, and the great ship itself drifted closer for a final pass, its guns still glowing with the heat of battle, its shadow dragging across the domes like an eclipse. No voice rose in protest, no hand dared reach for a trigger. The colony stood still, silent, obedient. Then the Halcyon sent its last words before it left the system. Maintain strength. Do not summon us again unless you accept the cost. Then its engines flared, bending space into a wound of light, and in moments it was gone, leaving behind only wreckage, silence, and the memory of fire. The leader lowered her head, and in the quiet she whispered a truth no one wanted to speak. We are alive, but we are marked, and all across the colony, from the shelters to the med bay to the lonely engineer's console, the same thought rose and settled like ash. Their SOS had been answered, but not by mercy. It had been answered by a dangerous ship, and that answer would never be forgotten. Asterisk, the departure of the Halcyon left the colony in a silence so heavy that even the air felt denser. Every dome, every corridor, every shelter seemed to echo with the memory of its engines, the afterimage of its burning drive, still lingering in the sky like a scar across the night. The people of Aram 9 gathered slowly from their hiding places, some blinking against the sudden quiet, some weeping with relief, some trembling with the realization that survival had not come from kindness, but from something far more frightening. The ground still shook in places where raider wreckage fell in smoking fragments, and the sky still flickered with the light of fires that would take hours to die out. Yet the true weight pressing on the colony was not the ruins above them, It was the silence imposed upon them, a silence written in iron words, a silence that could never be broken without risk of death. The leader walked through the streets, not as a commander now, but as a witness to what her people had endured. She saw families leaving the shelters, clutching one another with pale faces and wide eyes. She saw guards standing stiff at their posts with weapons still in their hands, not because the threat remained, but because they did not yet trust that it had truly ended. She saw children carrying their brave stones, holding them as if the smooth little objects could protect them from the memory of what had passed. The elder walked beside her, his voice low, saying that stories would already begin, stories that would travel across whispers and across years. And though the Halcyon had forbidden them to speak beyond their world, he knew the truth. Stories cannot be caged. They live in the breath of people, in the look of their eyes. And one day, no matter the warnings, someone would tell the galaxy what had happened here. In the med bay, the doctor moved with weary steps, stitching, cleaning, binding wounds, and though he spoke calmly to each patient, his heart was restless. He thought of the human words, "Survival is your compensation," and he wondered what kind of mind could speak so coldly and believe it was enough. Yet as he looked at the faces of those still breathing, he felt the bitter truth settle into him. Perhaps it was enough. Perhaps life itself was the only gift humanity knew how to give, and anything softer would never come. The engineer meanwhile sat in the comms room, staring at the silent beacon, his hands hovering over controls he dared not touch. He remembered the feeling of hope when the first human reply had appeared, and he compared it to the feeling now, heavy and strange, a mix of gratitude and fear. He kept tracing the codes that the Halcyon had left behind, patterns of war, lessons in deception and survival. And he realized that even in their silence, the Deathworlders had given them tools. Not kindness, not comfort, but knowledge carved from steel and blood. The colony began to rebuild in cautious steps, clearing wreckage, patching domes, lifting the wounded from bunkers. But their work was done under the shadow of memory. Every hammer strike, every torch spark seemed to echo with the thought that the humans might return if their silence was broken. At night, people whispered to one another, asking what the price of the next SOS might be. Some said they would never call again. Better to burn alone than to invite the storm. Others said they had no choice, because when death comes, no one else had answered, and the Deathworlders had, whatever the cost. The leader listened to all of it, to the fear, to the anger, to the gratitude. No one dared to speak aloud. And she knew her people would carry this mark forever. They had survived. Yes, but they had also been judged, weighed, and measured by something far larger than themselves. When dawn came, the first true light in days, the sky above the colony was clear of human fire, but not of memory. Wreckage still burned on the ridges. Ships broken in halves and quarters lay like dark mountains against the horizon, and children pointed at them with both fear and fascination. Already stories were forming. Already the truth was being reshaped into something that could be carried in the heart. Some said the Deathworlders had come as angels of war. Others said they were demons in iron. Others still whispered that they were not beings at all but storms. Wearing metal skin, the elder told the leader that the story would change with each telling, but its heart would always remain. The SOS had been answered, not by allies, not by neighbors, but by Deathworlders who had remade the night into fire. The leader stood at the highest dome, watching the horizon as the sun bled across it. She knew she would spend the rest of her life holding this balance, keeping her people alive under the weight of silence, keeping their hope alive without letting it grow into a reckless call for help. She thought of the human ship, vast and terrible, and wondered if one day it would come again, not as rescuer, not even as punisher, but as judge. She closed her eyes and whispered words only for herself. "We are alive, we endure, we remember." And those words carried her through the long day of rebuilding, while across the galaxy, far from their world, somewhere in the dark, The halcyon drifted onto another call, another world, another judgment. For that was the way of Deathworlders, to answer not with aid, but with fire. Asterisk, the story of Aram 9 did not end with the departure of the halcyon. In truth, that was only the beginning of a larger echo that rippled outward across the stars. Though the humans had silenced their channels and forbidden them to send transmissions, whispers are not carried only by signals. They are carried by people, by refugees who flee, by traders who stop for water, by broken satellites that drift too far and are found by scavengers. And soon the galaxy began to hear pieces of the tale, broken fragments that still held enough shape to ignite fear. In the great councils of the empires that had ignored the original SOS, debates grew sharp and bitter. Some leaders said they had been wise not to answer, for to stand beside the humans in war was to invite ruin. Others whispered that perhaps they had been foolish, for now humanity's reputation grew larger, its shadow stretching further than ever before. Merchants told stories in starports of a warship darker than night, a vessel that erased raiders as if swatting flies. Soldiers passed rumors in mess halls that the Deathworlders never brought food, never brought medicine. They brought only judgment, and judgment was always written in fire. Smugglers and pirates whispered it most fearfully of all, for if an SOS in some forgotten corner of the galaxy could call down such a predator, then no shadow was safe, no hideout secure. Back on Aram 9, life returned in slow and careful steps. The domes were repaired, the farms breathed again, and children were sent back to their lessons, but nothing was the same. The people lived with the memory of what had hung over them, and they walked with a kind of reverence and dread. They no longer spoke the word rescue without hesitation, because rescue now meant something sharper, something that cut even as it saved. The leader knew that generations would carry this weight, and so she began shaping a new discipline for her people. She told them to endure, to rebuild, to be silent, but also to be ready, because if the Deathworlders ever came again, they must not be surprised. She kept her people steady with rules and with stories, and though she did not say it aloud, she also kept them sharp with fear. The elder told the children the story differently each time. Sometimes he said the Deathworlders were storms in iron. Sometimes he said they were hunters who stalked greater hunters. And sometimes he said they were fire that burned in place of mercy. But always he ended the story the same way. He said they came when no one else did, and for that reason, alone. They could never be forgotten. The children listened with wide eyes, clutching their brave stones. Some grew afraid, others grew proud. And already a new generation was beginning to decide what kind of memory the humans would become, a terror or a strange kind of hope across the galaxy. The tale of Aram 9 became a warning passed between crews, spoken in low voices in the corners of cantinas. Don't ignore an SOS, someone said, because if you don't, the Deathworlders might answer instead. And when they answer, they don't bring aid, they bring a warship. The phrase became a saying among smugglers and raiders, a curse muttered when things went wrong. The SOS reached humanity'd say, and then shake their heads as if to drive away the omen. But among the broken and the desperate, among those who had no other hope, the words carried another meaning, one quieter and more dangerous. If no one else comes, call them, because they will come. The galaxy turned with this new story in its bloodstream, fear spreading, respect growing, curiosity rising. And in its cold lanes the halcyon moved on to another call, another beacon, another desperate voice in the dark. It left no banners. It carried no songs. It gave no thanks and no warmth. But everywhere it went, survival followed. Survival at the price of silence. Survival at the edge of terror. And that was how humanity carved its place among the stars. Not as healers, not as allies, but as the dangerous answer to a question too many worlds were too afraid to ask. What happens when the SOS reaches Deathworlders, and the only reply is a ship built for war?